Warriors, Anthony Slater from The Athletic. Slates, let's just start with the obvious one from this perspective. What do you think of the move? Jonas Valanciunas coming to Sacramento.
I mean, it's pretty low risk, right? I mean, it's 2 seconds and a guy you're just reflipping Sissoko. Yeah, I guess the opportunity risk or the opportunity loss is who else might they have fit into that trade exception they got for Herter. But, it gives them size, a little bit more thump down there, a little bit more toughness. I'm sure it's approved by Domantas Sabonis, which is always, a nice little benefit. I don't know how much those two can play together. I'm sure not that much, but I mean, there's probably been several times this season that y'all have been watching those 4 minutes of Alex Lynn or whoever, going, man, that didn't go well, and the hope is you spend this small of capital to make it so those minutes aren't as bad.
Our guy, Anthony Slater, joining us. Anthony Slates, can you just describe to me the level of activity you're hearing surrounding the Sacramento Kings, and how would you say Monty and Wes and those guys have maneuvered through this trade deadline here? Obviously, a lot of big moves. Seems like they're doing a lot. Can you just describe what you're hearing about how active Sacramento has been in some of the work behind the scenes?
Yeah, really active. And I think part of the reason you got the timing on the Fox deal when you did, which was pretty early, right, was because they had a lot of other balls up in the air, but I feel like they wanted to nail down the Fox situation, which, to do that, you had to convince Chicago to part with LaVine at a point that I think Chicago, it's possible, could have got more for LaVine had they waited. I know a couple teams, including the Warriors, that had interest in LaVine, but they just didn't want to strike yet. But because the Kings struck when they did, not only did they get him, but I think it allowed them to then kind of reposition themselves to fill out the rest of the team how they wanted. Obviously, that's Valanciunas, and you do hear that they're, not necessarily done. It's not for sure that they are going to get anything else done, but they are making calls. That's for sure. And they have extra draft capital. I wonder how that 2031 unprotected Minnesota pick that they got in the Fox deal, that's got to be heavily valued around the league.
Slates, I know you're focused on the Warriors to a degree. So what, if anything, is up with KD returning to the Warriors? Would that trade have happened? But he kiboshed it today when he said he didn't want to go back to the Warriors. Is that what happened?
I mean, pretty much. It's been about a week now that the Warriors have tried to kind of bring this one together. It's really a complicated 3-teamer with Jimmy Butler, whose future is obviously still up in the air. And I think, they could have made the deal without Durant's blessing. It's not like he has a no-trade clause. They've talked to Phoenix plenty, but it wasn't just that KD or that, Kevin wasn't neutral on it or kind of open to it. He just really didn't want to come back. And, I think they just decided, they've done this before, right? They've had a Kevin Durant who didn't want to be there on the roster before, and
right.
I think they just decided not to sign up for round 2 of that. But you know what it is? It's another public miss by them. They've had plenty of them. They're trying to get this co-star. They were close on Paul George. They were close on Lauri Markkanen. They flirted with LeBron last trade deadline. There's even been some, Jimmy Butler talk during this deadline, and that quieted. Now that's ramping back up, but it's just maybe because of who they are as far as from a brand perspective, and their name's often out there, but it does not look great on them that they just continue to try to get big names and miss.
Yeah, Anthony Slater joining us. What does the future hold for Draymond out there? I mean, any sign that they move on from him in any kind of big deal?
I think the only chance of that would have been in a Durant move if for either chemistry reasons or money reasons, if you had to get that over the finish line. Durant was the guy in this transaction cycle that I think Kuminga would have been available for, and Draymond potentially. But now that they're moving on from that, I think they're going to be pretty protective of Kuminga the rest of the deadline, and I do not anticipate Draymond Green being traded at this point.
Slates, what do you think of the fits here? You got De'Aaron Fox going to the Spurs. You got Zach LaVine coming to the Kings. Which do you think ends up being a better fit ultimately?
I really like Fox in San Antonio long term. I think there's a reason he targeted there, and obviously I'm the co-star that he's going to be playing with there. but it's interesting. I mean, we'll see what he does this summer if he re-ups and it turns into a long-term extension. I'm sure the Spurs want it to be. You wouldn't have, traded some valuable picks if not, but he's kind of gets the first crack at being Wemby's long-term co-star, but I assume, the Spurs are going to be maneuverable here. So I want to, I think, get as much information as possible about how much that works out because as we saw with Luka Doncic, right, guys are on the clock quickly. Like these situations more and more, these generational talents can be on the clock quicker than you think. So I'm curious to watch Fox starting tonight. And then as far as Sacramento goes, we can debate whether making a win now trade was the correct thing to do, but Zach LaVine's having an awesome season. I don't know if you guys have the stats pulled up. He's like, 45% from three?
Yeah, 45,
high volume. He's had some knee troubles and foot troubles the last few years that have really slowed him down, but that seems to be gone this year. The explosiveness is back. He's really getting to the rim. Just like the straight line burst, I think it's going to, if you got fans out there that haven't watched him much tonight, I think just like that burst that he's going to show you just in a half court setting to get to the rim is going to stun a lot of people. I mean, everyone I'm sure remembers the dunk contest from several years ago. I was actually at the one in Toronto. He's not quite that athlete anymore, but there's still a lot there. So he's spectacular in a lot of ways and can really shoot it. Now, defensive question marks, which means the team remains with major defensive question marks because, I mean, look at the entire I shouldn't say Keegan Murray, good two-way defender, we know that, but the other four guys, all have like pretty major defensive question marks. So, the good thing is that it should be fun brand, right, at this point, and it seems like Doug Christie's leaning into it, like, try to win 128, 125. And what's interesting to me, the first team they're playing is like a grind-out slugfest type team, tonight. So, is it a 128, 125 type game tonight, or can Orlando wrestle it into like a 98, 95 type game?
Hey, Slates, what can you tell us about the final days of De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento? Why was the move made now? Was it pressure from Clutch Sports and Rich Paul to get De'Aaron to San Antonio? What can you tell us about those final days?
I think the pressure was slow building, and it wasn't in the final days, right? It goes back to the summer with him not signing the extension. We wrote a preseason story where De'Aaron was transparent about it. We've had segments where we've talked about this. I mean, that's the one thing I think you can kind of give him credit for in this process. He was not super hidden about where this was going. I mean, he's been saying for a while, basically, like, if he didn't see a long-term winner, a consistent winner here, he didn't really want to be here. Now, he's probably saying it in nicer terms, but clearly that message got to the Kings front office enough and got to ownership enough that they decided to green light the move. And it's been continually relayed that there was not any type of firm trade request. Clearly, it was, hey, if you're going to trade him, Rich Paul, they were going to help direct him to San Antonio by letting people know that long term he planned to try to get to San Antonio, and that will obviously taper everybody else's market because they don't want to trade for a guy that doesn't want to be there either. So I guess that part was influenced, but it's been continually relayed that De'Aaron wasn't demanding that he had to be out by the deadline. I just think the Kings front office was very aware that this was probably the time to move because now 1.5 years left on a deal and your guy's not signing an extension. That's kind of become trade time in the league where like guys don't really get to free agency anymore.
Yeah, a lot of people wonder whose fault was it? Was it Fox's fault? Was it the team's fault? No, it was Slater and Amy. They're the ones to blame for this.
Right. They started it all, right?
Yeah. You touched on this, Anthony, talking about how the premium players, sometimes they don't have long to prove their worth like they used to. But how much of the upheaval at this deadline is because of the new CBA, would you say?
I think there's a little of that. I mean, it's definitely like complicated the ability to make like easier trades. I mean, you're seeing it with Phoenix, like they're just like zippered up and like tied up in every type of deal because of the second apron. And the Warriors are dealing with that right now. They're 300,000 from the first apron and they're locked out of going past that. So like any type of they're trying to potentially make a Jimmy Butler deal here and they have to find a way to get above Jimmy Butler's money. because they cannot take back any, more than
Wow,
300,000. So there's nuanced rules that like the fans aren't that into that I think has kind of, rearranged
Right.
the rules. But I wouldn't blame the new CBA on like the Luka trade, right? I think that was just a weird, wacky, like unprecedented trade with a GM that stunned everybody. And again, I don't think that. I mean, maybe you could say because they were so scared to pay Luka that supermax that he was going to be eligible for, right? That $350 million. That probably had something to do with it, but I think it's actually just made stuff more complicated than more like free out there.
Well, enjoy the game tonight, Slates. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, fellas.
All right, Slate.
Anthony Slater from Salt Lake City. Yeah.